She walked in with confidence, polished shoes, calm smile, a quiet grace that turned heads. But to the hotel manager, none of that mattered. To him, she was just another unwelcome guest. Within minutes, voices rose, cameras turned, and a crowd watched as he pushed her out into the street. Humiliated, disrespected. But what he didn't know was that Nyla owned every inch of that hotel. And the moment she turned back around, everything he thought he controlled was about to collapse. This wasn't just revenge, it was revelation. Nyla Johnson was the kind of woman who carried calm like armor. A black business strategist from Atlanta, she'd built her reputation on intelligence, patience, and quiet resilience. That morning, she arrived at the Crestline Grand, a five-star hotel known for elegance and exclusivity. It wasn't her first time here, but today was different. She wasn't just a guest. She was the silent partner behind its new ownership deal. The ink was barely dry, and she planned to observe the hotel's service before introducing herself officially. Dressed in a cream blazer and gold-rimmed glasses, Nyla could have been any high-end client. She smiled at the front desk clerk, politely waiting as another guest was greeted with champagne and red carpet attention. When her turn came, the warmth vanished. The clerk's tone cooled, and eyes darted toward the manager. A man with a practiced smile and superiority sharpened over years of unchecked authority. He didn't know her name, didn't bother to ask. To him, Nyla was just another woman who didn't belong. Someone to question, someone to move along. She noticed the judgment in his eyes before he even spoke. It was the same look she'd seen her entire career. Disbelief that someone like her could hold power. She took a seat in the lobby cafe, pulling out her tablet to review notes for her meeting. Around her, businessmen laughed over espresso, staff moved with rehearsed politeness, and the piano music played softly. A world that seemed perfect from the outside. But perfection has cracks. When the manager approached, the temperature of the room changed. His shadow fell across her table. His smile was tight, his tone falsely polite. And though Nyla didn't know it yet, this ordinary morning, one coffee, one condescending glance, was about to turn into a public humiliation that would shake the entire hotel to its core. The tension began like a quiet ripple. Small, almost unnoticeable. Nyla sat in the corner of the hotel cafe, reviewing renovation notes, sipping her latte, unaware that the manager's gaze had been locked on her since the moment she entered. His name was Richard Haynes, a man who carried arrogance like a uniform. Every step he took across the marble floor echoed control, or at least the illusion of it. He approached her table with a condescending smile. "Excuse me, miss, this area is reserved for hotel guests," he said, glancing at her clothes instead of her face. Nyla calmly reached for her handbag, pulling out the room reservation confirmation she'd made earlier, purely to test the hotel's treatment of their guests. But before she could hand it over, Richard's tone sharpened. "I'm sure you think you have a reservation, but we can't just let anyone sit here." The words stung, not because they were loud, but because they were casual, practiced. The same way someone might brush dust off their sleeve. Around her, a few heads turned. A waiter paused mid-step. Nyla's posture stayed steady, her voice even. "I believe there's been a mistake." But Richard wasn't listening. He was performing. "Mistake?" He scoffed, his voice rising now. "The mistake was you thinking you could just walk in and make yourself comfortable." The room fell silent. Conversations froze. The pianist at the corner stopped mid-note. Nyla could feel every eye in the cafe fixed on her. She set her tablet down carefully, refusing to let her composure slip. "Sir, I'm a paying guest. I'd like you to verify." Before she could finish, Richard gestured toward the door. "Ma'am, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. People like you are better off somewhere more familiar." That line cracked something in the air. It was soft enough to be deniable, sharp enough to cut. A woman at the next table gasped. Someone started recording. Neela's calm expression didn't waver, but inside her chest tightened. The humiliation wasn't new, but this time it was public. Richard's voice carried across the lobby now. "Security!" he called, waving toward the front desk. "Escort this woman out before she causes a scene." The irony burned. He was the scene. Two security guards approached hesitantly. Even they looked unsure. The front desk clerk whispered something, eyes darting nervously between Nyla and the manager. Phones began to rise like a slow wave, screens glinting under the chandelier light. Nyla stood. "You're making a serious mistake," she said softly. Her calmness seemed to irritate him more than defiance ever could. "The only mistake," he snapped, "was letting you through the door." And then it happened. A shove. Not hard enough to injure, but enough to send her off balance, her bag tumbling, papers scattering across the polished floor. The crowd gasped. One voice in the background whispered, "Did he just push her?" Another shouted, "Keep recording!" Nyla looked at him, not with fear, but something colder. A quiet calculation. She bent down, gathered her papers, and turned toward the door. Cameras followed. The humiliation was complete, at least for now. As she stepped into the sunlight, the hotel doors closing behind her, the recordings continued to spread online. Richard smirked from inside, proud of his control. But in less than an hour, his world, his job, his reputation, his illusion of superiority would begin to unravel. Because the woman he had just thrown out wasn't a guest at all. She was his new boss. 40 minutes later, the boardroom on the hotel's top floor buzzed with quiet conversation. The manager, Richard Haynes, straightened his tie, summoned there after a call from corporate. He had no idea why. His arrogance was still intact, until the doors opened. Nyla stepped inside, not in shame, but with the unshakable calm of someone who'd already won. Her clothes were still creased from the shove, her hands steady as she placed a leather folder on the table. The executives fell silent. Richard blinked, confusion crossing his face. "You? What are you doing here?" Neela didn't answer. Instead, she slid a single sheet across the table. Embossed, official, undeniable. The ownership contract, signed and sealed. Her name printed clearly beneath the title, Majority Stakeholder, the Crestline Grand Hotel. The silence was deafening. The same man who had thrown her into the street now stood frozen in front of the woman who owned the building beneath his feet. His smirk vanished, replaced by the slow realization that his career and his pride had just ended. Nyla's voice cut through the room, calm and razor-sharp. "When you humiliated me in that lobby, you weren't just disrespecting a guest. You were disrespecting the future of this company." She pressed a button on her phone. The video, the one filmed by bystanders, played on the screen behind her. The shove, the slur, the disbelief of the onlookers. Richard's hands trembled. Executives exchanged horrified looks. The brand's reputation was imploding in real time. Nyla leaned forward slightly. "Effective immediately," she said. "You're terminated. Not just for what you did to me, but for what you've done to everyone who looks like me." The room stayed silent. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Richard's lips moved, but no words came out. Nyla gathered her papers, turned toward the window, and spoke one final line. Quiet, but echoing with power. "Next time, think twice before you decide who belongs." And with that, the woman he tried to erase became the one name he'd never forget. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, the video of Richard shoving Neela spread across social media like wildfire. Thousands of comments poured in, some outraged, others heartbroken, many recognizing a familiar pain. This happens every day, but most of us don't get the chance to fight back. The hotel's PR team scrambled, statements were drafted, and apologies were issued. But no public apology could erase what everyone had seen: how quickly dignity can be stripped away when prejudice goes unchecked. Nyla didn't celebrate his downfall. That wasn't who she was. Instead, she turned the humiliation into reform. Her first executive order as majority owner was clear: mandatory diversity and bias training for every employee, from housekeeping to upper management. Anonymous reporting channels were launched. Promotions began reflecting fairness, not favoritism. For the first time, the hotel became a place where every guest was treated like they belonged. Months later, Nyla walked back into that same lobby. The same chandeliers sparkled overhead, but something was different. Staff smiled with genuine warmth, not forced politeness. Guests of every background moved freely through the space. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. She paused where she had once been pushed out, remembering the sting of that moment. Now, it stood as proof of what dignity, patience, and quiet strength could build. Injustice didn't end with that manager. It rarely does. But sometimes, one act of courage can break a pattern years in the making. Nyla didn't just reclaim her place. She redefined what it meant to belong. And as her story spread, it asked one haunting question that still lingers. How many more Nylas will be pushed aside before people realize respect isn't a privilege, it's a right? Don't miss more powerful real-life stories. Hit subscribe now.